hope that this morning gives you some pause for thought, and I'm really privileged to be with you on your sustainability journey wherever you are in that. So welcome to the session, and do critique, analyze, challenge me as much as you like, and I will try and rise to it. So first of all, I'll just quickly give you a romp through Julie's bicycle, how we interpreted leadership when we were founded about 12 or 13 years ago, and then we can go into what I think the challenge is before us. So first of all, I'm just going to start with kind of asking why culture? And of course, thus far, culture has really not been a huge part of the public or the political positioning or narratives on the climate and ecological crisis, which is quite baffling, because I'm sure for all of you in the realms of culture, that culture, of course, is deeply profound. It breathes into every part of who we think we are. It's how we understand our heritage. It's how we understand history. It creates and determines the communities both to which we already belong and those that we navigate towards during our lives. It shapes our outlooks, how we taste and feel the world around us. It determines so many of our behaviours, and fundamentally it reflects our deepest values. In short, culture is very often how we experience identity, and therefore it should be at the heart of any of the existential crises that we have around climate and the environment. Here we have the different moments. This is a piece by Oliver Eliasson. It is a beautiful piece of work at Tate, the Weather Project, in which people lay down to experience atmospheric conditions. One manifestation of culture, the aesthetic. There is the community manifestation of culture, that being part of a group, belonging, and of course there is how culture actually determines our futures, what it means to young people, and in this context, culture has never been more needed to express and explore issues around justice and equity. So Julie's bicycle, our key objectives are three: net zero carbon, which basically means decarbonising our economy, and restoring of nature, which is experiencing so much damage and so much threat and onslaught. It is pretty much equally threatened and threatening as the loss of an equal temperature. Secondly, it's inspiring public action on the environmental crisis. This is really important. So Julie's bicycle has started from a position whereby the culture as a system needs to embody and experience what it is to be an exemplary demonstrator of how we can live. We can't inspire the public unless we change ourselves. So that's a very simple and very ancient idea, that in order to talk the talk, you also need to be walking the walk. And if we do that, I think we have an incredibly important part to play in tackling this existential crisis that we have on our hands. And the third area is championing climate justice, recognizing that climate change is a symptom of a wider problem, which is about the use of land stewardship. It is caused partly by colonial mindsets that take, they destroy, they steal, and we need to really understand that if we have a hope of dealing with climate change, we need to put justice and the idea of equity at its heart. So that's our Julie's Bicycles approach. So just a little bit about how we tackled it. So the very first thing we did was to carbon footprint the UK music industry. In 2007, we produced a report which covered the key areas for which there was enough data. And we have found that doing that basic piece of research has been incredibly helpful and produced a huge amount of other projects and themes. First of all, it allowed the music industry to understand how it impacted climate. So it gave us priorities, which at the time were really interesting. First of all, packaging, plastic packaging, we realized was hugely important. So the music industry in the UK committed to reducing plastic packaging. Movement of artists, bands, orchestras, another big area. Energy in buildings, huge. Festival travel, huge. So just this basic piece of research produced an enormous amount of interesting projects, but it also legitimized for the music industry an approach to tackling their carbon footprint. The second, then we then, out of this research, we developed a lot of learning and resources, which is our second key area. How do we promote climate literacy and translate that into the cultural sphere? And we've produced a set of free carbon calculators. You're very welcome to go and have a look at them. You get snapshots of your carbon. This has been generated by the cultural sector, so it's very focused on and bespoke to the activities of culture. That's concerts, it's events, it's theatres, it's tours, it's productions. So do go and have a tweak at those if you're interested in understanding your carbon footprint and you don't already know what that is. They're now used by 5,000 organisations from many countries, and that's helping us to really understand what cultural impacts need to look like. We've also, out of this research, you can develop lots of resources. So this whole idea about taking a question and finding some answers will give you so much more than just that initial question. Converting that into resources. So we have a huge amount of resources on how to run buildings, productions, tours. We have a lot of events, networks that have just grown out of this original piece of work. Then there's taking action. And so it's all very well to know about this issue, but how do you act on it within your communities? Julie's Bicycle runs a very rich program, which also helps to fund us. We have a consultancy arm, and we've worked with a really large number of organisations, mainly in the UK, but increasingly internationally. It's a really interesting new field of practice, and I'd urge you to go and find out about it. It is the way that culture will be going. And we also run an award scheme, Creative Green, and we've had, actually that's out of date, we've had about 500 certifying organisations, again from all over the globe, and it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate practice. That it's based on something called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the key accounting system for environmental impacts globally, and it's starred. And of course, the minute you have a star system, you develop some really interesting motivation to get 5 stars. So that's been really helpful. And these are some of the organisations in the UK who have been certified. So some of them are very big, and it's a very, very important peer group. So this community of creative practitioners are all talking to each other, fast tracking good ideas and understanding where the barriers might be. That sharing of practice is so important. And then in 2012, our National Arts Funding Council, the Arts Council in England, made environmental reporting a funding requirement for around 800 of their key portfolio. And Julie's Bicycle has been both delivering that program, but also tracking progress since that time. So it's been a really useful mechanism for the whole of the arts community in the UK to both come together, collaborate, develop a level playing field for climate literacy and understanding, and then develop a really rich program around it. It's been a real privilege for us, and of course, it's changed so much. So I'll talk about that program in terms of the funding a bit later on today. But in short, what this program has done is provided us with an international data set of 5,000 organizations measuring their environmental impacts. It's created huge wider value. We've been able to track the increases in well-being, a really huge increase in artistic work being developed and commissioned on climate and the environment. And we're also tracking it across a Green Deal metric. So what does employment and skills and justice look like? It's given us a library of guides, resources, case studies with well over 1 million downloads. We found that carbon emissions have reduced by about 35%. And up until very recently, we haven't asked anybody to reduce their carbon, but just by understanding their impacts, they've automatically done it. Savings of around 20 million, which is perhaps 26 million euros, and a lot of new skills, knowledge and work. So it's been really, really helpful for the movement and for climate. And we've now got a terrific leadership group. This is a group of organisations in the UK who are developing pathways which will take them as organisations to carbon neutrality. It's called Spotlight. It's 30 organisations, big organisations, who are now tracking and reducing their environmental impacts to meet the 2050 carbon neutrality challenge, carbon zero challenge, but hopefully quite a lot before that. So this is really, really exciting. And we've put on a big festival of climate leading up to the next COP26 climate negotiations called Seasons for Change. It's a very open, free program. And again, if anybody's doing work on climate or the environment, this is an invitation to tell us about your work, and we will amplify and celebrate it. So this is all about movement building. But of course, is it enough? And the answer emphatically is no. The climate crisis is not going away very fast. There's a huge amount to do. The science is very unsettling, and we have to work really differently at scale. So what does scaling and accelerating look like? Well, it looks far, far beyond anything that Julie's Bicycle as a single company could do. I'm just going to put back my PowerPoint because I'm not sure if you've still got it. Yeah, there. So to try to understand better what scaling and accelerating looks like globally, and what does it mean to mobilize at scale, Julie's Bicycle has looked at 4 key areas. One is all for culture. One is decarbonisation. The second is nature. What does it look like for nature? The third is zero waste, losing waste altogether. And the fourth is justice for all. And these relate to all the key international frameworks that we're working to. There's the Paris Climate Agreement, there's nature and biodiversity, and there's more and more, I think, that we will see around protecting nature and regenerating nature in our legislatures. The No More Waste is around a circular economy, and justice is about the Sustainable Development Goals and the Green New Deal and the Green Deal. And of course, in Europe, you have made a really exciting commitment to a Green Deal for culture. And certainly in Julie's Bicycle's work, and you are far advanced than this country, which seems to me to be going backwards. But we will be mapping across the Green Deal, which is a terrific opportunity, and of course has released a huge amount of new investment into the European economy. So we keep a census on what's happening in this space, and we've done a global census around what is happening around the climate movement in culture, and we've identified some really interesting trends. We've called them the 7 trends, and I'm going to whiz through them. And this has really surprised us because we've realized that there is a huge amount happening everywhere we look of extraordinary pioneering leadership. And I think our role really is to support it, to celebrate it, to amplify it, and to strengthen it. So very briefly running through what these are. We found an enormous amount, I've actually missed one out, of pathfinding new organizations like, in fact, Julie's Bicycle, and I'm sure many of you perhaps in this room are included in this community of organizations or people at the cusp of climate and creativity, at that really interesting new area of cultural practice, finding different ways of doing things that are in tune with the needs of Mother Earth. There's art, of course. We've seen this incredible renaissance in artistic work. There is so much inspirational work that artists, musicians, spoken word, theatre, museums, curation is doing around our planet and how we live in it. So this is the theme of the day, and I think as cultural professionals who are supporting the arts, we really need to think about what's the best way of doing that. There's activism, all these artists and cultural professionals and young people getting up and making a noise about climate. Obviously, Fridays for Future has been transformational. There are cultural movements growing around this. Music Declares Emergency, which JB has been part of, has got well over 4,000 signatures from artists all over the world. We have a similar movement in Culture Declares, and we've got really active, politically focused, very motivated campaigners, both individuals and organizations emerging. Where do we sit in this? Can we be courageous and join them? Then there's justice, which is deeply, deeply enmeshed in this. The climate crisis is a crisis of culture. It's a crisis around colonialism and the toxic values of materialism and white supremacy that have dispossessed millions of people of their land and their livelihoods, and that we see all the time in our cities, where poor people, recent immigrants, or the kind of structural issues around racism or around equality mean that people are living in very polluted spaces where they can't get out. They don't have access to the kinds of privileges that the more wealthy do. So how we understand justice in the context of climate and the role of culture to challenge and to tackle this is absolutely fundamental. There's organizational leadership. Terrific. We can talk about that. What organizations are doing to embody and demonstrate values that cherish Mother Earth. What do you say how do you commission? How do you run your spaces? All of that. There's design and innovation. How does the creative community, which is so fundamental in the context of design, how do we design ourselves out of this deeply extractive economic model into something that is regenerative? There's policy changing, and our experience of policy changing has been phenomenal, because when the Arts Council made that policy announcement, everything has changed. So policy and the policy around the Green Deal is an area of huge importance. Finally, there's collaboration, which I'll go on to in a minute. JB is working to develop a global network of artists and cultural leaders in this space who can steward this through. Again, if you're involved in this, please tell us about it. And we'd love to hear your story so that, again, we can amplify your work. And essentially, what does this all look like? It means that we need to shift from a cultural economy to a cultural ecology, where everything speaks to everything else, where consequences of our actions are known and understood, and our constraints really are around regeneration, around safety, around cherishing this extraordinary planet and putting justice at the heart of it. And that's justice for people, but it is also for the natural world. So the big question for us is, can we do it? Can we do it in time? And can we do it together in collaboration? And a few kind of key principles that we've learned over the years. One, that the arts and culture is an ecosystem already. It is holistic. And so it needs to work very differently, not in competition. It needs to work as a system, and it is nothing less than a full systems change. The second thing to look at is not to worry about being too instrumental about art. That if we create the positive conditions that reflect values that care for the planet, that care for the natural world, in what we all do, creative content will follow. Julie's Bicycle has never commissioned any artists to do a thing on climate change. And most of our partners haven't either. That creative content has emerged because creative people, artists, if they are held in a space which is demonstrating these values, will respond very naturally. And anyway, they'll do what they want to do. So we don't need to worry about this. Thirdly, focus on the bits that matter. Justice, reducing our carbon emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions, getting rid of waste, and really being positive towards the natural environment. The fourth principle is evidence and data mapped across these key areas, these key themes. Evidence and data is fundamental. You need to understand what you're doing in order to take the right decisions and reduce your impacts and put positivity back into your work. So evidence, really understand your impact so that you can make good decisions. The fifth is don't reinvent the wheel. Please collaborate. We found that there's an emergent competitive nature that's being brought to this. We haven't got time to be competitive. We have to share good practice and we have to come together. We need to work in a really different way to the way that we have worked in the past. This is really important. We need to move away from competition in the context of climate and into collaboration. And that's very challenging. It's very counterintuitive, but it's critical. 6, champion empower leadership wherever it is. That doesn't mean at the top of an organization. I expect that you will find, if you haven't, that many green champions, many people who are really doing good work are not necessarily running organizations. They might have something completely different. But I would wager that there are champions committed to sustainability pretty much in every organization. You need to go and find them and empower them. Align big cultural policy, 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit. How does that look as it relates to everything that you do? So that's called science-based target setting. Make sure that your work aligns with what needs to be done. Advocate and invest in creative climate action, which might be the Green Deal. Reach beyond national borders. Again, we don't have time to be too confined. We need to get out there and be really internationalist, really global in our work, and celebrate the new cultural economy. Really, this is where the future lies. So very briefly, I've just got 2 final bits and bobs to say, and then questions. I do believe this deeply. I believe that if we change culture, culture can change the world, and we desperately need the creative community to be part of this change, not just to save our own, not just to determine our own futures, but we have a really big role to play. Thank you. That's it. So I wonder if there are any questions. Annette.
Thank you so much, Alison. What's always lacking in these online sessions is applause. So I've learned that this is, you know, the way to signal your applause. Thank you very much for your inspirational talk. I was just told that not everybody can see the chat function for some technical reason, probably. So if there are questions, please use the overall Kongress chat function and send them right to me, and then I will try and channel them and pass the questions on to Alison. And as I said at the beginning, feel free to ask them in German. I'm happy to translate and pass them on. And while waiting for chat messages to arrive, I of course have a huge number of questions, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the certification program, because that's a topic that's been discussed here in Germany again and again, and institutions also asking for certifications, and we can see in neighboring countries there are certificates around as well. How exactly does it work, and have you got German institutions that have a certification?
So the first question is how it works. So the program is based on 3 principles. One is, the first is it's largely for organizations. It's how do you commit to taking climate action? And that's really about understanding what needs to sit in your governance, what processes you need to put in place, how you express that internally. The second, and the systems that you might need to do your environmental audits. The second principle is based on improvement. And Julie's Bicycle, unlike many certifications, we require an absolute reduction in your greenhouse gas emissions, because Mother Earth doesn't really care what you do. You have to put that integrity into the heart of it. So we have that, but it's also all sorts of other areas too. It's waste, it's water, it's all sorts of things. How do you improve on what you do? And the third is really about celebration. How do you talk about it? How do you celebrate it? And there's lots of opportunities for creative innovation and commissioning. So that's the framework. It's improvement over time. Lots of people are which is great, because it really stokes ambition. It has it's a network. So we have events and for people to share ideas and come together to understand what's really going on. We have a big awards. We had it last week. It was terrific, where we award on the basis of achievement, but also on the basis of green champions and all those people who are doing amazing work, and cultural pioneers and campaigns and all sorts of things. It's been really wonderful for moving people through a process of profound cultural transformation. So you need to start at the bits that you can manage and that feel really achievable. And over time, because this takes a bit of time, you stretch and stretch and stretch. And I think what's been really lovely about it is that it is very culturally, very arts focused. So you have now got a network of creative, artistic pioneers. They might be financial managers, they might be artists, they might be venue operators, but they really do know about climate and sustainability. And we've learned so much through that experience with them. So in terms of where it's at, so we are talking about it right now. With, in fact, your next speaker, I think, Jakob Billabel, around doing it, adapting it for Germany. You know, all these things really do need to be adapted so that they're very fit for purpose for whichever community we're working. But we do run it in Spain, in Chile. We've got in Ireland. In fact, it's part of the Ireland cultural green recovery program. Yeah, that in Greece, in Italy. So as long as it's adapted so that it really speaks to the community that's running it, and that's not our thing. That's really led by whoever is doing it. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds fun. Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that insight. I've got a question that's been in my head for a while, because I think virtually at the beginning of your program with the Arts Council, I was at a totally unrelated conference. I think it was Lancaster with the British Shakespeare Association, and I don't remember what we talked about. It was something Shakespeare, and then this theatre manager, I think it was, stood up, or was artistic director, and he said, "Well, and then." On top of everything else, we now also have to be freaking green." And he was really annoyed, and he was really shouting out. And I, because I followed how it developed, and people's minds changed, and it became something that was self-understood, and that you were actually proud to participate. So, how did you win these people over? What did you do?
I'm just moving because my battery suddenly looks low. So you've got intimate relations with my household.
Get a little guided tool.
Yeah, so that's a very common anxiety. Lots of people feel anxious to do this in the first instance because they think it's going to be unpopular. But it is worth knowing, that particularly the Arts Council programme has been their most popular funding requirement. We have never had less than 80% of popularity. There will always be a small number of people everywhere who don't want to do stuff. They don't want to do it. And I'm sure, Annette, you'll know, because you're a climate veteran, a sustainability veteran, but it's very clear that there will always be a small proportion of people who don't want to do climate or don't believe that the climate is changing. Then there's an increasingly larger number of real pioneers at the other end of the spectrum, and that's terrific, and they're on their journeys. And then the bit to really focus on is that middle bit of people who are interested and willing and prepared to make a change, but really need some support. So, but it's been very rare that. So I would always urge, I think that one of the things that we've found consistently is how happy taking climate action makes people. It feels like it's hard and it's going to be traumatic and difficult. It is hard, and it is traumatic, and it is difficult, and it is also joyful, and it gives you such a sense of agency and relief and appreciation, and the best people you meet along that journey. So I'd be surprised if the man from the Royal Shakespeare Company felt the same now. But anyway, tell me who it is and I'll check him out.
I don't remember who he was. I don't remember. But this actually links in with a question that I got, because you said that you're keeping track of the development and that you're also measuring well-being. What does that mean exactly? Does that tie into what you just described?
Yeah, it does. So what we ask, so because with the Arts Council programme, which is about it's about a third of our work, we have endless metrics to report on, and actually it's been really helpful. So we've got two reporting bundles. One is on carbon and environmental impacts, and that's been really useful to see that 35% drop. But the other is qualitative metrics. How do people feel? What are they, how else has this changed how they work? One of those metrics is how you feel about your organization or working within your team. And those have been really, really exciting, that well-being, both general well-being and well-being, how good you feel about the work that you're doing, has grown higher and higher and higher every year that we've done it. And it really does speak to that point that actually being really quiet and silent and inactive in this space is actually, I think it's harder than being active, because it feels so out of control. And actually, it's very much in control. We just need to relate this big issue down to our own lives and our own organizations and companions, and take little actions which together are going to make a huge difference. So that makes you feel better. It makes you feel weller, happier, and more in service. And being in service to the planet is a great place to be.
Okay, thank you. That I think also connects to another question that I have here, is because you mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals as well, the Agenda 2030, and well-being is one of the goals, health, good health, and well-being. And how does your work tie in with the Sustainable Development Goals? That was the question.
So the Sustainable Development Goals are a really interesting framework, 17 of them, all 17. And of course, climate and the environment is a systemic problem, which actually I think one of the problems that we have is that we break these themes up into these different bits. And the Sustainable Development Goals is both really helpful. A lot of our work maps directly across to all of those goals. But also, because there are 17 of them and they're different, it can be quite confusing. What I think this is speaking to those different frameworks. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Green Deal, I think, are fundamentally about social and environmental justice. And that's incredibly important, as I was saying. Then there's the 1.5 Paris Agreement, which is really about climate change. And then there's the circular economy, which is really about waste. And there's all sorts of new emerging economic and stewardship models around them. They really need to work together. I think one of the problems with too many different frameworks is that they start to compete. And actually what we're looking at, really, if we put it really simple, is a systems complete reset. The system that we're currently living, working within is profoundly damaging, very challenging, but it needs nothing less, in which all the Sustainable Development Goals, all the Paris targets, etc., need to work in a holistic and self-reinforcing way. So thank you for the question. Absolutely. Sustainable Development Goals, 100%. And this is why Julie's Bicycle has knuckled it down to 4 key areas, which is nature, net zero, justice, and zero waste. Just to get a simplicity around it.
Yeah. And not to mention the 169 sub goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, make it even more complicated. There's a question: what can Germany learn from your work in the UK?
Well, so that's another very good question. I think, first of all, the principle of mutual learning is really important. I think Julie's Bicycle has been very lucky to have started when we did, which was before anybody in culture was looking at what this looks like as a systems shift. Lots of people were doing really important commissioning work. And I suppose, I think what you could learn from us is there's a huge amount of resource that has been developed now, and I don't think it makes any sense